one of the other main blocks, if you will, of literature that we have in these read-alouds for this year are the Animal Fables. Right. So let's start talking about these guys, Cyrus, Amos and Boris, Farewell to Shady Glade.
Farewell to Shady Glade is an animal story, but it's really about progress.
That's right.
These guys, what kind of animals are they? They have lost their... it's all different kinds. They've lost their place because of
That's right.
Because of progress.
You got these bulldozers coming in.
That's right. Mm-hmm. And so that Bill Pete here is just continuing that Virginia Lee Burton theme about what happens when you're, what are we doing when we tear down trees and take out entire swaths of country and build.
Right.
I feel like it's a really sympathetic.
It is.
Story
Again,
about these cute
characters
little
are
guys.
so relatable.
But this is also a book about leadership.
That's right.
This is about authentic kingship right here. This little guy, he is an actual leader. And when everybody else is afraid and everybody else is judging him for taking them away from their home, he is just still, he still perseveres and continues to lead them. He doesn't give up. And it's really, it's not easy for him. And then, they're on this train and I'm sure at some point he's thinking, what have I done? We should have just stayed and, and tried. But then they find another home that's just like their new Shady Glade. Or they don't end up in the same place, do they?
No, but it's very similar. That's right. Place. Yeah. Gollum's Ring, Wilburn Charlotte, Paddington. Oh, hey there. I'm just listing off things that are precious. Speaking of, we know your time is precious, and we're so thankful that you're spending it here with us on Novel Thoughts. If you enjoy this episode and want to see more episodes like it, let us know by liking, commenting, and sharing this video with those who are precious in your life. Thanks for being here. Now let's get back to the episode.
But that's an interesting point, too, because we often talk about, the significance of home. And most of these stories, sort of ground us and root us in home. And,
especially the agrarian stories.
That's exactly right. The island story, the Cooney.
Oh, yeah.
Island.
Oh, yes.
So, but this story is interesting. And it kind of reminds me of the Ming Moves the Mountain story too, because in those stories home moves, right? And so in that way I think you can think of home is not merely a place, and so it kind of introduces the idea to a student that home is more than a place. It can be your community. It can be, you can have home anywhere, really. It's just the conception of home is always going to be a rootedness, but it doesn't necessarily have to be to a physical place.
That's right. Their community moved.
Right.
Their entire community was their home.
Right.
And it moved all together, and it had to have a leader. And I tell you, this guy is Moses. He is taking these people through the desert. And it didn't take 40 years, but they are mumbling and whining. Yep. Yes, this really reminds me of Moses trying to get those people through the desert.
But it is. I mean, and I think that's, we talk about home, and in these young stories, we talk about ideals, right? I mean, we talk about what it means to be home, and home is your community and an island boy. But you can see that there's many facets to that. And so these stories kind of introduce us to that ideal, and also the variances of those ideas and how we can still achieve the ideal in different circumstances.
Like, what is home?
That's right.
What is the definition of home?
Right.
And we are really expanding that in the second grade.
That's right.
Because up until then, it really has been a place. And now we are seeing it doesn't have to be a place as long as you've got your people around you and you can make your home. But now Island Boy is
a physical,
tied to a place. It is generation after generation tied to a place. And it is a story about a man who, as a little boy, then it tells the story of his entire life. It reminds me of Miss Rumphius. Because it is, Miss Rumphius is the story of a woman's life, like the whole story from a little girl all the way to an old lady. And this is what Island Boy does, and it does it beautifully. because you really get to know the community and his commitment to it and the generations that follow him. And so, and it also teaches at this point, we're ready for students to start thinking about death isn't always a tragedy, at the end of a good life. And that's what you have here. You've got his death at the end, but it is what he's left behind is a huge inheritance of place and the importance of all of the things that he valued that he's been able to pass down. And so at the end of a long life, death is a rest. But what really matters is what have you left behind? And so I feel like this is a more mature look at home.
I think so, for sure.
We've had.
Well, and the very last words, right, are, a good man and a good life.
Right.
And it's simple words, but really powerful. And, what else is there to be a good man or a good woman and have a good life, right? That's what we're after. That's why we're doing all of this, right? And so what a simple way to convey such a powerful thing.
Yes. And this is his grandson that has come along after him. And so just, the age of a grandparent then is something, that children have to think about. And I think that in a gentle way leads them there.
This book's also great because it sort of mirrors Farmer Boy and, Little House on the Prairie and some of these, books, because it kind of shows, a life that's not as modern as ours, and they're making jam and they're, tending the animals.
They're sustaining
that's right. They're very self-sustaining.
They're reminding you how difficult it was.
That's exactly
to live
right.
on the land.
And it's interesting, particularly for us landlocked, Kentuckians here, to have a genuine experience of coastal living.
Yes.
And so I think that does that beautifully as well too. Just kind of describes the circumstances of each environ, so interestingly. And so, I think this book is beautiful. It reminds me a lot of the Laura Ingalls Wilder books, just in the way that things are described so beautifully, and you can really get a sense of how that life is lived.
Yes.
Well, and one of the things that I liked about it a lot, we've talked about community as well. And so, Farewell to Shady Glade, you've got a community that you've uprooted and you've moved, but the community has stayed the same, even if it's in a different place. Here, the place is the same. The community is changing because you've got generations of people that are in view. But even when the first island boy who becomes the grandfather in the end, even when he dies, even though he spent most of his life now on this island, he's still interacting with his community people. Yes. And he had spent time as a younger man, as a captain of a ship. So there's a lot of adventure. There's a lot of cool things that you're reading about. But even as he dies, in the funeral scene, everybody's on the island. So even if you live a kind of secluded life on a place like an island, you still have community. You've still got people around you. You still are affecting
That is your
people.
community.
That is your community.
Is that place that you live, and it doesn't matter how many people are in it.
Yeah.
But everybody came to his funeral because he was well respected and loved. It's amazing, just this. We've talked about it for so long. I feel it feels like it should be a novel, and it's just a picture book.
That's right.
It's beautiful. But you said something, he is a captain, right? And so in all of the literature, we're going to find what you said, authentic kingship, right? I mean, in Shady Glade, and here is a good captain.
That's right.
And, we're going to see these things over and over again as,
George
authentic
Washington
leadership, right?
Yeah.
And so even in these small books, we can distinguish what it means to be a good person,
That's right.
And when authentic leadership is happening, even in very small, pretty isolated circumstances here. So I think that leads us to all of these boat stories, right?
That's right. Well, in these, let's transition back now to the fables, the more imaginative literature. Of course, with the boat, you've got Cyrus, the unsinkable sea serpent, who is protecting a boat throughout. Then you have Amos and Boris, and the whole story gets started by the fact that the Amos, the mouse, creates a boat and then suddenly finds himself without a boat.
Needing rescue.
Which one do y'all want to talk about first? Which one is your favorite?
My favorite is Amos and Boris. Cyrus, to me, is just an adventure story. It's just, and maybe you've got something deeper that you've found in Cyrus, but it's just, it's a sea serpent that's just looking for his place, and he just is ends up being helpful.
That's right.
You know, he destroys a pirate ship to save sailors, but the pirates don't get hurt.
That's right. Everyone's okay.
It's just a nice little story.
It's a fun story.
It is a fun story.
I definitely think, yes, it's
and
not
he's just trying to find his place,
That's
right?
right. That's right.
I mean, what else can you get out of Cyrus?
I think you've got it.
I was going to look and see if I had any other notes that were if I found anything else that's amazing that I don't remember. I've just got that it was charming, an adventure story, and it's about being different, the uniqueness, but also he has a sense of responsibility as he tries to find out who he is what his role in life is. And then at the end, you know, he goes and sleeps for like a month on an island because he's so tired and he doesn't know why he's so tired. And he's worked really hard.
Well, these adventure stories are great, I think. I mean, I think adventure stories are so important because in this modern, I tell my children all the time, like, it's okay to be uncomfortable. It's okay to be uncertain. It's okay to experience inconvenience. You know, these are the things that are necessities of adventure. And so just to have a willingness to endure things that are, think about how lucky we are. Whatever temperature we want it to be, whatever food we want at any particular moment. We really don't have to experience a lot of, inconvenience, uncertainty, discomfort. And so just to see these stories, I think is great, just to have a willingness to understand what is really part and parcel of adventure. And I think that's, one of the great things about Amos and Boris. And, I think of all the Narnian tales, and particularly, the Dawn Treader, they're wet, they're cold, they're afraid, it's dark, they're hungry, all of the things that they're willing to endure for this grand adventure to good things.
Yes, which is Amos.
That's Amos and Boris, right?
So when it first describes Amos, and he's just adorable on this giant ocean, and I don't even like mice, but he's a cute little guy. I like cartoon mice.
You do.
And it says he was enjoying his trip immensely. It was beautiful weather. Day and night, he moved up and down on waves as big as mountains. And he was full of wonder, full of enterprise, and full of love for life. It's just like this tiny little mouse, and he's having this great life until he needs help. And his boat sinks, and Boris the whale comes and saves him and takes him back home. And then when he gets back home, this one has so much humor in it. Where does Boris go then? He goes to some kind of convention.
Yeah, there's a whale convention
on the Ivory Coast.
Off the Ivory Coast.
Yes, so he goes to a whale convention. And then I'm trying to find where he says Amos is so thankful. And so he tells Boris, if I can ever do anything for you, then I will do anything to help you as you've helped me. And Boris laughs to himself. How could that little mouse ever help me? Little as he is, he's all heart. I love him and I'll miss him terribly.
That's right.
Then he goes off to his convention. And then he ends up being, what do you call that when you are stuck on beached? He ends up being beached. Well, of course, it's on Amos's beach. And Amos comes out. Well, he can't move him because he's a tiny little thing. As Boris said, how's he ever going to help me? And so then Amos goes and finds two friends who are elephants who save Boris's life. Isn't that perfect story?
That's right. It's exactly like the ant and the elephant.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Right.
It is. Those elephants, they're heroes every time, aren't they? And they knew that they might never meet again, but they knew that they would never forget each other. They each had to live in their habitat. The mouse could not continue to live on the back of a whale in the ocean, and the whale could not live with Amos. But this is a true book about friendship.
That's right.
And about sacrificing for a friend, but also about the fact that your friend doesn't have to live next door to you. You can have friends all over the place. And I think you find that out, especially when you go to college. But if you've got a friend that moves away, they can still be your friend. Right. You can still be connected. But, when you go to college and your world expands and then your friends are from all over the country and they can still be your friends. But I think for children, this is a really important thing that they need to think about and know that you can move and you get a new set of friends, but then that's just more people to love.
That's right.
And so I love that little book. And I think I just think my big summary of it would be that it is really about true sacrificial friendship.
One of the things that we've talked about with this imaginative literature is how important the imagination is. And we believe that. We're going to continue to hold that. But one of these books gives us an idea of maybe some of the danger of imagination, Sam, Bangs, and Moonshine.
Yeah, we've preached imagination, and then we get to this book.
Which I think is important because we do need to talk about how imagination can mislead, especially children, where they can go off and continue to imagine to the point that something bad happens. And that's exactly what happens here. You have Sam, Bangs, and Moonshine, and Sam is a little girl, and she's always imagining. But
is that because of the loss of her mother?
That, I think, is an interesting question.
She started living in a different world because she had lost her mother.
And I think that's one of the beauties of this book is how gently it talks about that and about her death and loss and how you truly can be affected by that. But even still, it does say that she had the reckless habit of lying.
Mm-hmm.
And
it
calls it lying.
Right.
And the main event that happens is that she has a little friend who's her age who comes and sees her. And she's always telling him this story, I believe, about a kangaroo, that she has a baby kangaroo. And she always tells him, she just left. She's over somewhere else. And so the little boy goes off to find her. Well, this time she tells him to go look at a rock. And the problem is the rock is out in an area where once the tide comes in, it can be surrounded by water. And so he goes and he gets stuck. And so she frantically is talking to her cat, Bangs, and Bangs is talking back to her. And so Bangs goes off to try to help. And she just has to deal with the guilt of having sent her friend off to a place where he could actually be hurt. But in good storytelling fashion, it's through that she learns that there is a limit to her imagination. You also see it in the fact that Bangs, yes, he's been talking to her, but not really. You realize later that she's been imagining his conversation with her the whole time. So it's good literature. It's great that it introduces students to the idea of how the imagination can be talked about without being called imagination, that this is imagination that's going on. But I think that this is one of those stories that helps serve as a corrective to the potential misuse of imagination. And
it also is a story about having to reap the consequences of our actions.
That's right.
That when we do something wrong, other people suffer. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a huge lesson, and that, our students are going to see over and over and over. And I think that's part of what this is too. She really thought that she had lost her friend.
That's right.
Now it all is happy.
Well, and
it's fine. But
I think it's a great story too. I mean, it goes back to a little bit like the Velveteen Rabbit. We're always in pursuit of what is actually real, right?
That's right.
And so, and we can be deceived in so many different ways, right? We can be deceived by, facts, or we can be deceived by words, or we can, and so, but truth and reality, is always present. We just have to really, really be perceptive and seeking for it at all times, because there's a lot of veils to truth and to reality. And so I think that's an interesting, thing that you said, that's a corrective of one of the misuses.
That's right. I think one of the, in later years, much further down the road, a student might read Charles Dickens' Hard Times. And I think Hard Times is an excellent way of talking about this. That here in Hard Times, you have a character named Thomas Gradgrind who is all about fact. Everything is about fact. No fancy. That's one of his taglines, no fancy. But it's in that fact that he that he only deals in fact, that he essentially corrupts his children by never allowing them to fancy. And it's the great sadness of his life in later years that he never allowed fancy, because his children do turn out to be simply pragmatic beings who have no real imagination and, importantly, in Dickens' terms, no heart. And that's what I think what we're trying to do with all of this. We've got facts. We've got the 4th of July story. We've got fancy. We've got Cyrus, the unsinkable sea serpent. We give you the warning here that imagination can go too far, but the proper use of fancy, the proper use of fantasy, where you are getting at the metaphysical, you are recognizing that there's a reality behind reality, and sometimes it's the imagination that uncovers that. That's what I think we're trying to achieve in these.
Well said.